Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to Wednesday, episode number 10 of the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club. Was the Glorious Album Club, but there's only half of the Glorious dead here, so it's the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club. But hope you're all doing well, and thanks for everybody that tuned in last night. It was a quick little burn, and it's been getting some feedback for sure. Thank you so much for watching. Gentlemen, how y'all doing tonight?
Doing good.
Okay. What's up?
666.
Well, we've gathered here tonight to discuss the oddly named Johnny Touch band and the album Inner City Wolves. Before I get going into a little bit of history here, does anybody have any idea what Johnny Touch stands for or means? I have no idea. It's weird.
Nope. I've looked and looked. I can't find nothing.
Same here. I tried to dig a little bit and found very little about the band.
Yeah, there's not a lot to glean from the old interwebs about these guys, and I don't know. I thought maybe that Johnny Touch was a play on on Johnny Blade, maybe, but I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, the members have been in a lot of different bands, like Mournful Congregation and stuff. They have connections to a lot of acts, so I was a little surprised it was hard to find much info.
Yep. Well, I'll dive in here with a little bit of info. There isn't much. The band was formed in 2008. They're from Melbourne, Australia. They went on hold indefinitely in 2015. They've got a 2010 demo, a split 7-inch with Striker, a split 7-inch with Doomed Beast, and this full-length debut, Inner City Wolves. In further reading, I was quite surprised to find that this band consists of kind of a who's who of the Australian metal scene. You got members from Cauldron Black Ram, Mournful Congregation, Stargazer, Denouncement Pyre, and it also has Anthony Till and the drummer is named Denimal in this band. They were both in the band Misery's Omen, which was the second release that my label Byron Recordings ever put out. Anthony's also been in the band Sacrifix, Ghastly, and Mutual. All bands that, Sacrifix had a little bit of popularity on Nuclear War Now with a couple releases and a 7-inch. Back in the day, very good, gloomy, weird stuff. But this is a very talented band of characters for sure. But that's it for the intro. I guess, TJ, what made you decide to dig in with this present this album to us?
Well, it's been on my list since we kind of started this, and I finally got a hold of a solid copy of it. Fighting back and forth with like 4 different vendors on Discogs trying to get a copy of it, and I actually got the colored vinyl, which I was very happy about.
Cool.
But I just I was doing a while back. Marty and I talked about this few. I started doing a real deep dive into all these new wave metal bands and was digging out all these cool bands. Night. The name of this band I came across, and I'm like, what the heck is this? Johnny Touch, and the first song I heard was like it's like the fifth song on the record, and it just the hook in the one riff is so cool, and I just kind of got hooked right away, and I just thought I've only listened to the whole record one time prior to bringing it to the club, so I actually got to really kind of chew on it this time, and I just thought it would be a good one to listen to, considering, my choice. So I thought it would be a good one for everybody to take a listen to it. I really enjoy it, and so I thought, and got to discover this name. We got to, it's reason together why would you call your band Johnny Touch? What does it mean? Is it if it was a Japanese band or something, I might be like, I'm sure it means something cool in Japanese or something. But yeah. So pretty much that.
Everybody, we apologize. I think the squirrels over in TJ's woods are chewing on his internet connection a little bit tonight. He's a little in and out with the he's going to sound a little hit or miss with his vocals, I guess. But well, cool.
Sorry.
We might as well. That's okay, man. It's working. At least it's not cutting out. Too bad. But I guess let's start with first impression. TJ, what was your thoughts on this album? Starting off, first impression.
And my
Uh-oh.
first
Spoke too soon.
impression of it, like I say, it was. Am I there?
Mm-hmm.
Really in the head space for this kind of music at the time, and I tripped over this doing a deep dive on YouTube. Look bands, and my kind of ridiculous cover art and over the top kind of whatever. I just was like, I got to check this out. My first impression. So that's kind of why I landed on it. And whatever, and initially I'd done it as we go, but first impression, I thought it was pretty cool.
Right on. Jim, what were your thoughts?
Oh, cool, man. I liked the old school vibe of it. Definitely. Early '80s, just heavy metal. Not any other like really tags to put onto it there. Heard a lot of things that I like to listen to when I want to chill out. I heard like early Dio, heard like production values of like Armored Saints' first album. For me, that's just kind of like chill out music. So though there are definitely some like thunderous moments on here, it's not like a mellow record by any means. It's got real balls to it. So I definitely like it. The vocals kind of like were a little of a grower for me. And I think he kind of went outside his range a few times on the record. But for most of the part, when he kind of sat within his within his well, if you will, I think he pulled it off. And altogether, I just like the sound. So it's cool. I think when you're wanting to not listen to something that's weak, but you're not wanting to hear blast beats. An album like this sits really, really pretty in that sort of like, middle area here for like if you're working or trying to do something else, want to stay heavy but don't want to be distracted. So it's a good record for that.
Right on. Alan, your thoughts, first impression.
First impression, just even looking at it before a note played, I'm like, okay, this is another one of these new wave of traditional heavy metal bands. It's an acronym that gets thrown around a lot in recent years, NWOTHM. It's all these bands like TJ is saying that they're trying very much to copy the aesthetic of early 1980s heavy metal, kind of the pre-thrash years. They've got the goofy name with the very kind of fun but cheesy looking logo. The cover art screams early 80s heavy metal albums. They always have pretty short runtime, under 40 minutes, 8 to 10 songs, very straightforward traditional style like Jim was saying. So yeah, all I had to do was look at this and like, I know what this is going to sound like, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, sure enough, first impression was like, yep, this sits very squarely in that new wave of traditional heavy metal pocket there. Even with the production and such, these bands try to look the part, they try to sound the part in terms of production and songwriting, and Johnny Touch is doing the exact same thing. After the first listen, the impression is like, yep, this is pretty good, it's in that style. It's a style I've heard a lot of over the past year or so. So while I liked it, at first impression, like it's very good at what they're doing. What they're doing, a lot of bands try to do nowadays. So I was wondering, will this do something to distinguish itself or stand out from the pack of wolves with some subsequent listens, or is this just going to be another face in the crowd? So those would be my first impressions on this one.
Okay. My first impressions, knowing TJ, good friend, many years in a band with him. My first impression was shock that, knowing how opinionated and picky he is, that this album was the one out of all the traditional metal bands out there now that are coming back. This band was the one that he had to track down the vinyl and present it to the class. I listen to this every time I listen to it. I'm like, all the stuff he bitches about on other bands, and this is the one that I don't know. It's just, he's an anomaly. I mean, he's just one of those dudes that sometimes he surprises me. But first impression, it was a little distracting because there's a couple riffs on this album that was like playing what's this riff game in my head. The Metal Embrace, it took me a second, but it's basically almost note for note Dio's We Rock. The main riff is Dio's We Rock. In the song Dishonorable Discharge, this was a tough nut to crack, but I deciphered. It is basically Rat's Lay It Down main guitar line with a little bit of Why Can't This Be Loved by Van Halen somehow mixed together perfectly. I listened to both songs and went, holy shit. It's the same key, largely the same scale notes. It's kind of creepy and weird. So once I got past all that distraction and tried to take the album in, it's a fun listen. I think there's some production things that bug me a little bit, which we'll go into here in a little bit. But it's one of those bands that another one of those bands that they're doing it because a lot of these guys are older guys and they love metal, and I get it. They're doing it for fun, but it's also kind of a trend happening. And yeah, I mean, I liked it. Will I run out and buy it? Maybe not, but it's been fun listening to it. But I that kind of brings me to the point. This is a big what if. But what do you think the impact of this album would have been in 1985? TJ, I know this is a if woulda, coulda, shoulda type of situation, but does it sit within the pantheon of the times?
I mean, if you take a band, I mean, this record as it sits, and it feels to me like I think they would have got more. They would have been courted by the majors more because the band is so solid and so talented. And like Jim said, and I had mentioned this to you previously too, and Jim almost said what I said about is almost verbatim what I said, that he's got a range that he can live in that's really good, and it fits the music, and then he kind of falls out of it sometimes. He kind of tries to step up, but we'll get to that. But I think they would have gotten some good attention in '85. I mean, this record, and as talented as that guitar player is and his songs are written, I could see where a bigger label would have been like, hey guys, how about a 3-record deal? We'll send you to Europe and blah blah blah.
Change your name.
I think
change your name.
It definitely would have stood up. Oh, change. Yeah, there probably would have been some of that for sure. Yeah, and Noah makes a point there about the production. It's definitely, it would have gotten more attention. I think these guys, it almost. I mean, I was reading some of the notes in the liner, and the guitar was recorded here and the bass was recorded there, and it almost all sounds like they just gave their friends' bedrooms, their basements, a name to call it a studio, because there is some real issues with the production on this. But I definitely think it would have, back in the day, they definitely would have been contenders for real.
How about you, Jim?
Trying to get off mute. I mean, what kind of an impact? Yeah, I don't really know that they would have punched through because, to your point, Marty, I think their influences are definitely right there on their sleeve. And it's so awesome that you picked out We Rock, man, because it's the first thing I thought too when I heard that. But I love that song, cheesy lyrics aside. I don't care. So that's why that was one of my favorites on the album. I was like, oh yeah, Dio, okay. But no, man. I don't think it would have been a huge impact, but at the same time, I think it would have, fit right in on like a K-Tel metal music sampler. It kind of brought me right back to seriously. Like the first time I heard Yngwie Malmsteen was the Fire single. You know what I mean? And I still love that song to this day. And even though I don't like shredtastic stuff as a rule, Ingve created it, so I like Ingve. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I actually like some of the shrapnel stuff too. But yeah, I think he if it had come out at that time, it wouldn't have made a big splash, but it might have found its way into my collection at the time, because I was just buying anything and everything that if I liked it, that was enough for me. Or if the cover was cool. And this fucking cover is awesome, man.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
For sure.
I was gonna try in the thumbnail to put TJ's face on the lady over the lady's face on the Beast Rider thing. And I didn't have the time to mess with it, but I thought that would have been pretty damn funny.
That would have been sweet.
What about you, Alan? What do you think about this? How it would have fared in the 80s?
I mean, it would have fit in with the scene. That scene got very crowded early on as well, so whether they could have risen to the top, it would be a tough sell even then, to be fair. Looking back, we tend to focus on the 2 or 3 big bands that had a long career, but labels like Ebony had 1 million bands on them, Mausoleum had a ton of bands, Shrapnel in the US, and Shrapnel would be a real natural home for a band like this that was showing off a little more on the guitar side like this does. I can very much see Mike Varney rushing to put this band on one of the US metal compilations back then. They would have fit on that label next to bands like Wild Dogs and Rising Force and stuff. But or Rising Force wasn't on there, but Varney always went for those Guitar Hero kind of bands. He wanted to have that big killer Axeman in the band to showcase. So yeah, it would have fit in fine, and it is, I think, a step above some of those other bands in terms of talent and such. But whether they really would have gotten the push they needed to get big enough is really hard to say. That style of metal also, once thrash and the glammy hair side of metal started to get much bigger, around that 86, or by 86 timeframe, these other bands had trouble staying relevant. So maybe they would have gotten a little push there if they'd been out by like 83. But, probably by the time they would have done a second album, people had already been listening to Rain and Blood, and this kind of thing would have been sounding kind of dated pretty quickly. So
yeah,
you'd like to think they could break through, but I have a feeling, if I'm being honest, it would have been tough, even for a band, with this talent to really rise and hold out and get something really good going.
I agree. I think for me, 2 things. The name wouldn't have caught on. It would have been, I think a lot of metalheads would have wanted to check it out just because the name's weird, I guess, but it would have depended on what label they landed on. I mean, being an Australian band, they're not AC/DC. I mean, during those times, I'm trying to think what Australian bands were.
AC/DC, Rose Tattoo.
Rose Tattoo, which is AC/DC kind of, more or less.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's, the music is very old school metal, but it's also, there's a hair metal contingent. Like I said, there's a Van Halen Rat feel on here. There's a song on here called Radiation Exposure.
Best spelling ever.
Yeah, which sounded to me like Eruption if played by George Lynch. I mean, it was just that. I mean, there's no taking away from hair metal that it was full of shredders, and there is obviously a very shredder guitar contingent duo in this band, and I think the production would have needed to be a little bit better, but I don't know. It's certainly of the era, maybe a little ahead of its time. Like I said, it's being influenced by some of the hair metal stuff a little bit. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say, but Alan, I'm going to jump with you because you just did a show on this not too long ago, but I want to discuss the rise of this new wave of classic heavy metal. It's gained a lot of popularity over the years and a wealth of new bands. I mean, do they stand toe to toe with their idols? What has been your reaction to it?
Yeah, I did a video on this topic a month or so ago over on the Let's Talk Metal channel if folks want to check it out. And I'm of 2 minds on this scene. A lot of these bands are very good at, copying that sound and look and feel of those early bands. But at the same time, that's really all they are doing. They're copying something that was already done pretty well 40 years ago. and it doesn't necessarily leave them a lot of room to maneuver. If they make a second album and a third album, do they just keep copying and pasting over and over again? That could wear thin real fast. But if they try to branch out, they're no longer really sticking, to their central theme. And do any of us want to hear, Johnny Touch, do a, take on, Trivium or, some kind of, ginger style 21st century metal? That would completely be the wrong aesthetic. It's almost the opposite of what they've, started out with. So yeah, it's really tricky. It's cool that there are new bands wanting to do this. It's a good introduction for younger fans who weren't around 40 years ago buying Cuddy Shark records and stuff like that. It's a good gateway into that style of metal for folks to check out. But yeah, at the same time, it's really hard to imagine any of these bands achieving, the same kind of success that a Judas Priest or an Iron Maiden did. This style of metal just isn't in vogue with a large enough population for these bands to become world-renowned superstars now. I think most of these bands are aware of that. I think these are folks that are doing it because they really love the style of music, that it's a project for them. They're not counting on this to, be a full-time career. They're not quitting their day jobs. They're going to have other things going on in their lives so that they can do this. They can kind of keep it pure, do it the way they want to, and not relying on it to, become their life's work, or anything like that. So yeah, it's a balancing act. It's a fun nostalgia trip for older fans. It's a good introduction for newer fans. But at the same time, there's a ton of it out there. I mean, we could sit here, for the next 15, 20 minutes reeling off names of bands that are doing this kind of thing. So, I mean, it's a very saturated scene already. It's hard to, wade through it and figure out. It can be very hit or miss, too, on are you going to like this one enough to really invest in it and replay it a lot? Or is it one that you're going to play once or twice and forget the band even existed, a month later? So, yeah, it's a funny scene in those regards.
What are your thoughts, Jim?
Yeah. I mean, Alan's right. I mean, there is a lot of it out there. Oddly enough, other than the fact that one of these guys is in Stargazer, who I love and they're badass. A couple of them I think are in Cauldron Black Ram and
Mournful Congregation.
Yeah, Mournful I dig. They're badass, of course. Cauldron I don't like, but I'd rather listen to this than Cauldron. I think this is more fun and just a good time. So, sometimes I think you can kind of get outside and do something on the side. And, Talon's point, maybe not your main gig, but you kind of showcase a little bit of, your skills in a different way, outside of, the whatever BM type Cauldron is or whatever. But, I even though I'd rather listen to Stargazer or Mournful, these guys this is still some solid stuff. But I'm also coming at it from the perspective that I don't check out much of the modern trad. I typically like, oh, that's cool. Now I want to go back and listen to Court in the Act or something.
Exactly.
And that happens a lot with me when I hear bands that sort of emulate their heroes to such an extent, it just makes me want to go listen to the guys who influenced them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
why listen to the copycat when you can hear the original? That's the problem this scene can run into.
Exactly. So, I get it as like an homage, and I get it as something to do on the side, and maybe pick up a copy cheap at Shadow Kingdom or something like that. But if I'm spending $25 or more, I'm going to buy a reissue of something that was really there at the time and kind of set the tone and influence what was to come. You know what I mean? So yeah. So it from that perspective, it's really just kind of it is a nostalgia for me a trip. But to Alan's point, if it's a gateway for younger folks, you know what I mean. If they follow Shadow Kingdom and they kind of get into trad that way, or that's great. Whatever keeps the metal flowing. I'm good with it. So
Your thoughts, DJ?
Well, yeah, I definitely agree with there's a saturation on these new wave bands for sure, but I don't know. My take on it's always been it's like, I mean, there's you look at like popular music, pop music, whatever, and it's lather, rinse, repeat. Then times change and something new comes along, and then again they just kind of rehash. And metal music, we're starting to get into that stage of where the bands are coming out and now they're emulating their heroes, and you're getting these bands that are doing the stuff that Priest did and Dio did and whatever, and we're seeing more of that, and the bands are bringing it up and doing and so sure it's a nostalgia trip, but at the same time there's a lot of these bands that are so good and so solid. For me, it's cool to see because we've heard the classics, we've got the classics in our collections. It's all good stuff, and it's really neat to see somebody different doing something that's as good, rather than it's like, yeah, sure, why don't I just go back and listen to because I've heard it, and I know it's good. But if somebody else is like, like Night Demon, I mean, what a great band. What an absolutely amazing band.
Yeah, they're a good band.
Doing their take on Thin Lizzy and whatever else, and it's they're just really good. They do a live cover of In Trance with Uli John Roth. There's a live version. It's amazing, and that they're into it and that they love it. That it's not just like I'm in all these other bands and let's get together. And so many of these bands, these guys in all these extreme bands, all have a band like Johnny Touch, from what I'm told. Like they're all doing it. I mean, hell, you guys, Marty and Boris and them, they're doing their thing. I won't go to, I don't want to spoil anything. But,
Hammer Damage.
Yeah, okay. So, it's like, so people are doing it, and because of the nostalgia, because of the love for it. But, for me, it's like, I like, it's like, even like with Sweet Death bands, it's like for a minute there was just 1,000 bands trying to sound like Dismember and Entombed. It's like, yeah,
some of them, bands like Gate Creeper, they're kind of big. And they're not doing anything new at all.
Yeah, Gate Creeper is, to me, I don't even want to get into that band, but there's other bands, Demonical and I can't think right now. I've got some other ones in my collection that are just, Flesh Crawl, another one from Germany. Those guys
they're old.
Amazing.
I mean, they've been around forever, though.
Yeah, I know, but still, that they're kind of in that second wave of Sweet S style chainsaw metal bands. I know they have been around
for sure, just to piss you off.
It's just the Gate Creeper. Just, I don't know, man. Just kind of boring.
They got a lot of boring stuff, but there's a couple tracks that are cool, and they were.
I mean, they're good. It's just kind of
live. Their sound is amazing. Their sound live is amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. All right, sorry to distract.
No, man, no. But my point really is just for me, I think I like it. I like to see it. I think it's cool to discover new bands that are taking this traditional sound, this old sound, the other bands have done, and then they're taking it and trying to do their own thing with it. And the bands that are good, and I think it's cool, and I like adding that stuff to my collection and finding stuff that I can really get into. Versus trying to discover, when you get into the mood and you want to, find these other bands that are just, bands like Portal or stuff that I really like, that are just like out there and trying to take the mold and throw it on the floor and smash it and step on it and but yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, TJ. That there are a lot of metal fans that like hearing new bands take on the old style. You see this in lots of styles of music. It's like, why is blues music still so popular? I mean, blues music is a relatively narrow formula, yet there's every generation, there's a whole new wave of musicians that try to keep playing traditional blues music because they think they can take those same basic components and recombine them and do it as well or better than has been done before, and people enjoy it. And that's kind of what some of these metal bands are doing too. Yeah, they're not inventing anything new. They're using that old formula, but they're doing it well. And there is a fan base for that, even among older metalheads. You're absolutely right. Sometimes you just don't need to hear Iron Maiden again. Sometimes like I'd like to hear something like that, but I've heard, Run to the Hills enough times. So that's where these bands, can be really fun, even for, the older, more jaded metal fans. So that's an excellent point you made, TJ.
I mean, I agree completely with you guys. And this whole, traditional resurgence, I've skimmed the outskirts of it. I don't own any Haunt, and they've got like 50 records. I don't own any Enforcer or Striker. There's so many bands, and it just seemed like such an overwhelming thing to start buying that stuff up and getting into it, because it's not really saying anything new. And there's still a shit ton of bands from the past that I missed. I'm still trying to track those down when I get around to it, type of thing. And I really enjoy the talent of it. I enjoy, it's a, being older, it's a nostalgia trip. I can't really say it makes me want to go listen to those old records all that much, because I mean, I still listen to those old records. I haven't got into the new scene that much. And hearing this, I like it. I've listened to it, and the more I've listened to it, the more I end up liking it. But it just isn't been instilling this need for me to just go all in and buy all I can find, because I know it's kind of like war metal. War metal has one voice, one thing it's saying, and all the bands are saying the same thing. And this here, and fast and explosion and cacophonous blasphemy. I mean, it's blasphemy worship. Which, I mean, Blasphemy only did what, 2 albums? I mean, they didn't even say that message very often. It's just, but with this, at least, this whole movement, the musicianship's incredible. The guitar work is great. The songs, it's energetic, it's fun. Is it appealing to the older guys? It might be. It must be. It seems to me like it's just kind of getting the younger crowd into it, maybe, so they can go back and research the old stuff too. I don't know. I don't know where I stand on it. I wish I could say I'm all in on this whole classic thing, because I'm not. I've got a Night Demon CD. I might have gave that to you, TJ. I don't remember. I mean, I liked it, but I just don't see myself listening to it that much. I don't know. It's weird. Anyway, let's discuss the musicality and the composition of Inner City Wolves. TJ, why don't you start us off?
Well, I think the songs are really well done. I mean, they're catchy and well arranged, and I think they did a good job on them. And it's obvious, you're picking up on different things from where where their influences lay on the riffs and stuff. But I was hearing King Diamond stuff, but then you're like, oh, it sounds like Dokken and whatever. Like, well, I got almost zero history with Dokken, so that's not going to be a place I would have landed with anyway. Sure. But it's just a band I never gave a shit about. But I just and his talent goes. I mean, I didn't research any of the guys really as far, and so you guys like, oh, they're in all these. I was like, oh, well, right on. I mean, Mournful Congregations. I mean, that's cool. Dig that band. So it's like, the talent obviously it shows, it shines. I mean that. Get into favorite songs later, but that instrumental on there, I mean that, I'm not, I gave up on the shred movement many a moon ago, but I still, I can still find the appeal in some of that stuff from time to time. And, I mean, that was just like, what a throwback, I was just giggling at that, and it's a really cool solo too. So it's just like, so I think, overall, the musicianship and the songwriting and stuff, I think they did a hell of a job on it. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I didn't come away disappointed from any of these tracks, really. I listened to it, front to back, and it's all good for me. So that's my take anyway.
Jim.
All right, what was the question? I was typing.
We're talking about the musicality and the composition on the album.
Yeah. Oh, dude, musicality is obviously these guys are super ultra talented. The riffs are super familiar on some of the songs. The Metal Embrace, we talked about it already. It's a lot of Dio worship, but
we rock, baby.
It's we rock all the way, but
Yeah.
I fucking love it for that. I do, I do get a little like turned off by like too much shred. Like I sorry, other than the title, I hate radiation exposure. I think it's the worst
Yeah.
song on the record.
Agreed.
It's just a total wank for like 4 minutes with a couple of like cymbal hits and guitar every once in a while. I'm like, what is happening? I pushed my way. I pushed my way through it one time. Hey, and you know, you're a way better guitar player than I am, TJ. So
Well,
I'm sure you appreciate it. But I was just like, dude, okay. Every time I'd listen to the album, I'd immediately just get rid of it. I was like, nope, I'm not subjecting my ears to that again. That wankery could just go away. Yeah. Other than that, though, man, you know, I heard a lot of good stuff. Yeah, you know, it was all 80s all the time. That's what they were going for, and they definitely got it. You know, like, you know, heard some Saint in there, maybe a little bit of Rainbow. Well, what else? I got some notes on here. Maybe a little bit of Scanner here, but obviously without the slick production of Hypertrace. You know, it's I would definitely say more like an Armored Saint kind of Scanner, and that kind of like sounding like it was, you know, produced under a pillow, you know, really, really muffled tone without any highs or anything. And we're talking about it in the comments, but it actually did inspire me to listen to Riot today. I was like,
Riot rules, man. Alan's been slowly getting me into them, and man, like Thundersteel, what a great fucking record. Made in America, what a great album. Great stuff.
Yeah, Alan doesn't agree with me on Restless, but I love that one. And Narita, I mean, and what's the album with Tequila and Swords, man?
Fire Down Under.
That shit is badass, man.
It's a good album too.
That's some badass. That's got some of their best songs ever on it.
Oh yeah, I think that. First of all, that's the coolest title ever, man. Please give someone that's drunk on tequila a sword and watch
Swords and Tequila. Yep.
But no, man. Yeah, you know, let's, you know, and you know, another thing I like about this record, you know, besides like the musicality, obviously, you know, they're shredders, you know, and when the guy stays in his range, his vocals are cool. But their song titles, man. I mean, Bitch of a Son. It's so dumb. It's
hell yeah.
It's awesome. You know, yeah. I listen to Bitch of a Son a bunch. I like that one a lot, man. Just there's a little bit more thrash going in here. It's kind of getting away from the trad metal there on that song, but it works. You know, it's great. It's just kind of, you know, it's trudging along kind of quickly, but the chorus is super catchy. So I definitely recommend, if you don't like Dio and you don't want to hear the Metal Embrace, which you're crazy, you should listen to Metal Embrace. Definitely check out Bitch of a Son, because, I mean, Bitch of a Son. What else can you say? That shit's amazing. So yeah. But yeah, unless you really want to hear arpeggios for 4 minutes straight, radiation exposure, go away.
That's why I loved it. It was ridiculous. It was such a throwback, and he was doing it so well. I couldn't help but I just thought it was cool.
What were your thoughts on the music and the composition, Alan?
As we've talked about, you know, in terms of, you know, musicianship, yeah, they're a step above a lot of these bands, no doubt. In terms of composition, that was one of the things I did like about the album once I was playing it a few extra times. You know, a lot of these new wave of traditional metal albums are pretty straightforward, and this one does show a little more variety as you go through it. Like it or not, you know, you do have the cool kind of, you know, wide open, shreddy instrumental. And if nothing else, it's worth it for the name, Axe Exposure. That is vintage 1980s misspelling. I will give them an extra star for just because of the way they managed to spell that. I am a big fan of dyslexic, you know, 80s metal bands that, you know, failed their English spelling test. But, you know, on a more serious note, they have, you know, a couple of slightly longer songs, you know, like the closer, Black Company, you know, goes for a little bit longer, epic vibe at over 8 minutes. Lady Stutter, you know, has some different sections to it. It starts off, you know, kind of slow and moody and goes through a few transitions. That's something that a lot of these bands don't do. A lot of these bands just kind of, stamp out, the 4.5 minute song that's, verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, solo, verse, bridge. They follow the same template. And Johnny Touch did mix it up with some of their songs here a little bit more, so that you've got a couple of the more straightforward numbers. You've got this longer, more epic number. You've got the show off instrumental. So I ended up liking the variety on the album. After several spins, it became clear that no, these are songs that are not just interchangeable with one another. They each kind of have their place on the album, and they still fit into a 38-minute package, so it doesn't overstay its welcome whatsoever. So yeah, I kind of like the way it all came together as an album. Every song isn't a hit necessarily, but I like the fact that they were trying some different things within that space.
Yeah. For me, the first thing I really gravitated towards was the singer. He's not really super unique, but he's got a really warm quality to his vocals. I think Jim made the comment that there's a couple times he kind of stretches out of his range a little bit, but I like that bit of vulnerability, in the pitch style. It's good to hear a singer push himself a little bit. It wasn't bad. It wasn't cracking. It was just, you could tell he was starting to get into the red zone a bit, but I like his choice of decorating these riffs. I think he did a good job. He wasn't following, the stuff verbatim. There's a lot of room for growth in there for sure. The music I thought was quite good. Obviously, like I said, a bit of a hair influence here and there, especially in the shredding. Alan perfectly. There's a lot of variety on the record, which is cool. I will say, Lady Stutter, kind of ballad-esque at the beginning. It felt a little flat to me, but that could be a production thing, which we'll talk about here next. But I like the fact that it was under 40 minutes. I like the fact that it wasn't a big investment, and it was just kind of a fun listen, and it got me to listen to Rat and Van Halen today, a Van Hagar song that I haven't listened to in fucking ages, and I didn't hate it. I hated it when it came out. I don't hate it as much these days, but yeah, I think the compositionally they're great. And like I say, you got members of Stargazer, Misery's Omen, Mournful Congregation. These guys know how to write. Well, Mournful Congregation's case is very patient and powerful songs. You listen to like the June Frost by Mournful Congregation. It's like a funeral doom album with shredder solos. I mean, that is a very weird juxtaposition. I think a funeral doom album with shredder-esque solos, and the shredder solos on here are actually quite tasteful. Other than that radiation exposure, George Lynch playing Eruption. But no, I think they did a great job. And let's talk about production. Alan, we'll start with you this time.
I like a lot of these bands. They're not trying to overproduce these albums. That's part of the aesthetic, is they're supposed to sound a little bit dated and try to recapture that vibe of early heavy metals, and this one accomplished it pretty well. So yeah, it's not an amazing production job, but it's I guess it does fit the overall vibe of what they're trying to do. So I probably needed to be a little stronger. Some folks in the chat, have commented that, yeah, it sounds a little weak at times. And I do agree. There are times that between the, just the way they're writing the songs and the production, it actually reminded me of like some early 80s Swedish bands, that they always tended to have that same production problem of just not having quite enough oomph in the production to help get the music across sometimes. So yeah, that was my take on it. It's not a killer production job. I don't think it was supposed to be. If it was like a perfectly loud, clear production job, we'd be like, wait a minute, that's not what bands sounded like in 1983. So once again, these bands have to operate in kind of this weird narrow space, or you kind of you start breaking the fourth wall and you lose that illusion of trying to recapture what the scene sounded like at the time.
What do you think, Jim?
so bad with the mute. I mentioned already, like, I do like the production. It's got, I mean, it's obviously intentional to be like early 80s, kind of like a demo or whatever, like maybe an old Armored Saint demo or something like that. But I like that. I kind of, sometimes, a lot of the gloss that we hear, nowadays, or even in the later 80s as heavy metal with no non-thrash, non-death, everything started getting really slick and stuff, like with like Grim Reaper's Rock You to Hell and stuff like that. It's a great example of, an album that, I do like, but it very slick, and it almost kind of hurts the ears. It's so clean. And this album, it's heavy metal, but, it sounds, very underproduced intentionally. At least I think it's intentionally. But what's cool about it, though, is, the keys that they play in, and the kind of, the range that they stay in from like an, EQ, perspective. I think it really works for the guy's vocal and makes it sound better and more powerful, if you will. Like, he kind of reminds me of was it Keith Dean from Holy Terror? Not as good as Keith. Keith was a fucking badass.
Yeah.
Keith was an absolute. I mean, fucking Mind Wars. Are you kidding me? What an album. But hearing that, I'm like, anybody even kind of sounds like that. I mean, the guy was so unique and so different. But he had an area and he owned it. This guy can't own it as well, but he had that same kind of tonality in his vocal, and so it made it for me an enjoyable listen. And so, when I combine that sort of like warm demo-esque production with like a little bit of Holy Terror, not as good, but a little bit of Holy Terror-esque vocal with some killer riffs, I was like, hey man, this is a great thing. And I keep coming back to, like, it was great work music. I could throw this on, not be distracted. Something about, all the, the hurts, if you will, or whatever, like it kind of like stayed in this kind of warm frame where it just wasn't distracting or offensive to my ears while I was kind of doing something else or whatever. And, and sometimes I need a record like that, if I'm doing shit, I can't listen to, Dying Fetus when I'm like, trying to fucking write shit at work, and IT bullshit, but a record like this, can just kind of get in there, kind of sit and stew in a really good way. So, I think I guess it's irrelevant if it was intentional or not. That's how it comes across to me. And so, and for that reason, it works.
What do you think, TJ?
Well, I think the production was probably the biggest flaw in the record. I mean, there's so much cool shit going on, and it gets kind of, like, he sounded like he had his guitar volume turned down to half the whole time. And it struck me as so odd. And then it's like, it's like he's trying to do some kind of weird Steve Miller heavy metal thing with his guitar tone. I don't know. It was just really, it just needed more drive behind it. But, there's a charm to what they're trying to accomplish. The kick drums are washed out, and the bass, there's some bass breaks and stuff, and it's all thin, and it's just like, right. And but it was just like, for me, it's like if they went back and put a new production on the record, it would be almost a whole new album. But again, like you guys, I think, and I noticed this after a while. It's like, maybe that's really kind of what they were trying to do. This, like, let's not make, lo-fi. Let's make this sound like a low-rent metal band from the early '80s. Let's give it that. Let's give it that aesthetic. Let's give it that style and that appeal. And it adds a charm to it. Just like, even like with his vocals and stuff, there's just a few spots where he gets out there and he gets up just kind of outside the envelope a little bit, and then he brings it right back. And it's almost like you want to say, what, I mean, like the first time I played for Marty, you kind of like, huh? And I'm like, give it a minute. And then the riff kicked in, you're like, oh, okay. And it was just a tacit listen at band practice the one night,
Yeah.
Yeah, because his vocals were kind of like, he's warbling out just a little bit, but but you listen to the whole thing, and it's actually really cool. and he has a really good voice, and it works with the band really well. And,
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, by and large, it's just, I think, I would have liked to have heard a better production on it because I like the song so much, and I think it would have been cool to hear a more driving guitar tone under the rhythms. Like when he kicks his leads in, the guitar tone totally changes, and it's like, oh well, you could tell he paid attention to that shit. Obviously, he wanted to make sure those, he wanted that to shine. But then, none of it really gets lost. I mean, sure, the kick drums are muddy, and some of the cymbals are a little washed out, but by and large, it's all there. A good one. But yeah, so that's kind of, for production, that's kind of my take on it.
I listening to it again today for the second time, I kind of got a whiff of a room sound. It's almost like they recorded this live. And you're mentioning that it sounds like the guitar was turned down half. What I think they did, because since the solos sound so good, I think they recorded. They played. They had the gain channel on the amp up, but they played it on the neck pickup. So it's like it's distorted, but a bit cleaner. And then when the solos kick, the notes really cut. So I'm just thinking they played on the middle or the bridge or the neck pickup.
Single coil all the way, man.
Yeah, single coil with distortion would sound maybe a little bit like that. And the guitar tone, the rhythm guitar tone, is the weakest point. People were talking about the kick drum and the bass. I guess I didn't even really think about that much. Excuse me. But overall, I think it serves its purpose. It sounds very much like a polished demo to me. It's certainly not offensive. You get used to it about 3 songs in. It doesn't really, I don't think about it much anymore. But yeah, if that guitar tone had a little bit more, kick, like the first song, it's all right. I mean, it's a solid opener. It lacks the grit in the guitars, and it takes away a bit of that punch, which the song has punch. It just had a little more grit in the guitars. It would have been a little bit, it would have sold it a little bit better, I think. But I mean, the production to me is a C minus. It's not super offensive. It's not terrible. It's just, yeah, no, I would like to if it was more raw. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, let's talk about least favorite songs. TJ.
So my favorites are Dishonorable Discharge and Radiation Exposure.
Boo. I don't even know you anymore.
I just got such a kick out of that. I mean, I thought it was cool because it's like the whole band starts and the singer does that. He does that high scream, and then the lead guitar, he's like, woo, woo. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It was such a throwback to, Eruption and Van Halen and like, oh, hey. And I just kind of got hooked on it. So I thought it was really cool. And so, but yeah, I mean, overall, I liked all the songs on the record, really. I can't really say there was one that, the Lady Stutter gets a little, it's a cool song. I like it overall. There's some cool riffs in it and stuff, but it meanders a little. So I don't know, but definitely those two are my definite faves for sure.
How about you, Jim?
Well, yeah, hate Radiation Exposure. Total wank fest, just completely off the wall. And I'm sure they were going for like, let's just be over the top and all in 80s shred, and they succeeded at it, But like I said, I could listen to some Shrapnel stuff in the 80s, you know what I mean, and I appreciate it now. But it's
some Chastain,
yeah, for sure.
Impellitere.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. But for things I like, the Metal Embrace, we keep talking about that. The DOS song. I think it's fucking stellar. Not just because of that riff. I mean, there are a lot of good riffs in that song. The chorus is super catchy in it. The lyrics are all just like cheesy metal power. You know what I mean? You listen to it, and you're like, yeah, bitch of a son. I already mentioned that. killer chorus and a little bit thrashier. So for those of us with typically heavier tastes, it was a standout track for me. And I got to give some love to Black Company, man. The closer there. It's mid tempo, a little bit more. There's some slow moments in there. A little vocal misstep when he's kind of going, oh, I don't know what's going on there at the end there.
You probably didn't either.
He makes some weird choices, but other than that, though, like the dynamics of the song and like the way they chain the rest together are really cool. So it's kind of an interesting closer. They're not going out bashing you to death. It's just kind of like a little bit more contemplative, if you can call an album with a scantily clad mohawk chick riding a wolf, contemplative. But no, overall, I think it's great. It's a fun record, and definitely something that you can ride in your Camaro with the windows down to.
Yep.
Definitely.
What do you think, Alan? Faves or just least faves?
Faves and least faves. For faves, I really like the first two songs. I think it's a good 1-2 start to the album that tells you what you're in for, gets you settled in. They're both very solid songs. Least favorite is probably Lady Stutter. That one, again, while I say that they're trying to do some different parts and sections, it feels like the song's a little too long and takes a little too while to find its feet. Exposure, it's again the spelling alone, I give it a thumbs up. I don't even care what it sounds like. You spell your instrumental like that, I will listen to your instrumental and I'll smile while I do so. Let's see, the one other one I mentioned, Black Company, someone mentioned just a moment ago, it was kind of a grower for them, and kind of the same for me, but Black Company I thought was a better stab at doing a little bit of a longer epic song than Lady Stutter was.
Cool. For me, favorites, Bitch of a Son for sure. I like Dishonorable Discharge. I love the Rat / Van Halen riff. I'm a big Rat fan, still am. Metal Embrace, it's all right. Definite favorites. Least favorite, Lady Stutter. It starts off a little bit their take on a ballad, I guess. It feels a little bit flat and cheesy. Didn't care for that one much. And the Radiation Exposure, of course, was just kind of it's like, even Man of War putting solos, like drum solo and bass solo on records. It's just like roll your eyes moment. Like, oh God, Eddie Van Halen did it. And like I said, this is George Lynch playing Eruption, his take on Eruption. I'm going to go more notes than Eddie did. And it's cool, but it's not my thing. But, after End of Days, the album started to kind of bleed together a bit for me. Not good or bad. I just wasn't as focused on it, I guess. They kind of lost me a little bit, but no, solid record. I'll finish with a judgment, final thoughts. This is one that wouldn't go out of my way to hunt down. If it turned up cheap, I'd buy it and enjoy it on occasion. It's this kind of a what if situation. I would really have liked to have heard the follow up to this one. I think they had a pretty cool mission statement on this record. I think hearing this group of guys doing it in this style again would have been really interesting to hear how they advanced, knowing their pedigree, all the bands they've been in. It's pretty impressive. I mean, like I said, they're the who's who of Australian metal, extreme metal for sure. And they're super talented guys. I mean, it could only go up from here. This is a solid group of songs. I think the next batch could be even a little bit more considered and a little more comfortable in its own skin. But yeah, those are my thoughts. TJ.
Final thoughts? I give the record a solid B, I guess. I probably would maybe an A if it hadn't been for the production, but I just know I like it. I just think it's a cool record. I think the songs are cool. I dig the whole throwback vibe, the nostalgia trip. I feel like they're doing their thing. It's like, yeah, they're definitely their influences are firmly on their sleeve, and it was great big patch right there, But I think it's cool. I mean, I can see where I see some of the comments. Some of the guys are just kind of like, and I can see that, but I don't know. For some reason, it just stuck with me. So what can I say? I think it's cool.
It's weird. Like I stated in the intro, it's out of all of the fucking traditional metal records to pick, you found this little nugget and you made it your own, and you're holding the record right now.
Oh, well.
I just can't believe it. Jim, your thoughts? Final thoughts?
I agree with TJ on this. I'd say a B. Kind of just barely. I'd say an 81. Just because it's not really bringing anything new to the table. But having said that, it's a fun listen. And everybody's saying in the comments, and I'll ring it true there as well. That if I saw it cheap, I'd pick it up just because it's a good time, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great cover. Great song titles, catchy choruses. Stuff that I think on a few listens you would be singing along to. Especially the Metal Embrace and stuff. I mean, the Metal Embrace. Come on, that's fucking fantastic. But
she's a bitch of a son.
She's a bitch of a son. Don't know what that means, but it's amazing.
No, I'm not sure they do either, but
who cares, right? No, but
too much radiation
stuff.
Exposure.
After you've had your fill of depressive bedroom black metal and you need to come up for air, this would be the album to do it. Yeah.
All right, Alan. Did you say your favorites and least favorites? I can't remember.
Yeah, favorites and least favorites. A few last thoughts though. I'm right where y'all are at. I think something like B sounds like a good grade for this one. And yes, if I'm not going to go out of my way to hunt it down, but if I'm poking around in somebody's distro list and they've got it for a reasonably cheap price, I'll throw it in the cart, no problem. Last comment I'll make, just kind of a goofy off the wall one. Bands like this sort of interest me sometimes because of the mishmash of imagery they kind of put together on the cover and song titles. We were talking in the chat earlier, there's 2 songs on this album about human sacrifice with kind of like, a weird occult vibe to them. Yet there's nothing like that on the cover or about the band name at all. The cover goes more for this kind of Mad Max post-apocalyptic thing. But it also has this weird, Dungeons and Dragons element with, riding the wolf and carrying the big sword. And so I'm just like, so you're singing about, cults sacrificing people, and you've got, this, reject from beyond Thunderdome riding a wolf, and she's carrying a +3 automatic pump shotgun. That's just a weird mishmash of influences going on there, but it's fun. And that's a good way to sum up the album. Fun listen. Will I circle back to it a lot? That's always the big question with these things. Maybe some of this gets stuck in my head and I come back to it. Maybe 6 months from now, I'm just like, oh, hell yeah. Okay. I do remember that. And, but it kind of, it just doesn't get followed up on. It will be interesting to see if this one sticks or not.
Yeah. And with that, it brings us to the final action. Where Alan's choosing tonight, our next album club descent. Where are you going to be sending? Which rabbit hole are we going down this next week?
Okay, let me get ready to post it in the comments over here too. So, because I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce this, but we will try last year's album by Pestilence, which I'm guessing is Exidium. It's
okay.
It's from 2021. I have not heard any recent Pestilence whatsoever, but I got hooked listening to Testimony of the Ancients quite a bit a few weeks ago. And looking at this one, it had some decent reviews online. I haven't heard a single note of it, so I have no idea what we're all in for. But let's check out some newer Pestilence and see what those guys have been up to.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't checked in with them since their first comeback album. I can't remember the name of it.
Was that Hadean? Or,
yeah, it was.
Was it the one before Hadean? There may have been one before.
No, it was Resurrection Macabre or
you're right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Hadean was after that.
Malleus Maleficarum is like in my top 5 greatest records ever.
Cool.
I just love that record, and then of
They're
course,
most different from all their entire catalog.
yeah, and
Yep.
then of course, consuming impulse is mandatory. So what are you supposed to say about that? But you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
Right
again,
on.
I have not heard a single note from this one, but I will be interested to check it out, and we'll meet back next week to see what everybody thinks about it.
cool.
Right on. And with that, we'll close. Friday night, as most of you know, Jeff Wagner will be joining us for talk about his book, Destination Onward, the story of Fate's Warning. We'll be discussing their entire catalog, which I still have quite a bit of homework to do on. So that's what my next couple days are going to be involved in. But thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, TJ, for joining us. As always, tons of fun. Looking forward to seeing you all again soon. And everybody, thank you again. Anybody have any closing? Oh, wait. I'm too drunk to taste this chicken.
You said it wrong.
Oh, damn it.
Man. It's all
Damn
about the
it.
delivery, man.
Well, we still need to iron out the catchphrase at the end.
No, so you messed it up. So here, once again, let me work this out. Okay, everybody. I'm Batman. Nailed it.
Nailed it. All
There
right.
you go.
Cheers, everyone. Have a good one. Have a good rest of your week. We'll see you Friday.
Everybody take care.
Say it.